All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome into another episode of Inside the Hoosier Mind. We are back for Super Bowl week. I am joined again by Jonathan, our resident 49ers fan. Jonathan, how are you feeling this week, man? What's your feeling before we dive too deep into this?
Oh, Tony, I've been wearing red all week. I am all in. I've been back and forth on X, formerly known as Twitter, going at Chiefs fans who are calling us whiners for the field situation. Like I am. Last week, I got away from it. This week, I am all in.
Okay,
Let's go, baby. I can't wait for Sunday.
I don't know. Last week you kind of came for the smoke. You had the shades on. You had all of it ready to go. Like you weren't even hesitating. You were ready for it.
Hey, but people were doubting the guy. So like I stayed away from the sports media for the most part. Like all of last week, I didn't criticize anybody. This week
Mhm.
though, like starting Monday, I am in there, baby.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's jump into it. And I'm going to start this off kind of weird because I want to talk about the two games that each of the teams played prior to leading up into the Super Bowl, and then we'll segue that into who we think is going to end up winning this.
Sure.
So let's talk about on the AFC side, let's talk about the Chiefs. So I think we can all agree, come about mid-season, especially after that loss to Philly when Marquez Valdez-Scantling just decided he didn't want to catch a football anymore. I think a lot of people could agree. We're like, this is not a good year for the Chiefs. The Chiefs are not looking like their usual selves. They're not as dynamic offensively. Defensively, they weren't terrible. It's not like they were giving up a ton of points. It's not like they were having to get in shootouts with anybody. But this Chiefs team just wasn't the same ever since the season first started, and of course they lost to Detroit. We thought, wait a minute, this is kind of weird for the defending Super Bowl champions, and especially for Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes with the Chiefs. Well, here we are now, Super Bowl week. The Chiefs are in the Super Bowl from the 3 seed in the AFC, and it's kind of weird because aside from Miami with the playoffs, the Chiefs have not really dominated anybody these last two playoff games. Like they've won, they didn't really dominate Buffalo. I compare this really similarly to what happened with when I was criticizing Philly early on in the season. Philly wasn't really winning outright. Other teams were just hurting themselves more than Philly was, and Philly was finding a way to win. I feel that's Kansas City right now is doing the exact same thing of they figured out a way to beat Buffalo on top of Buffalo decided, much like for whatever reason, Dan Campbell and the Lions did of, oh, hey, it's 4th and 3 here. Let's run it with DeMar Hamlin on a fake punt and hope that we get it deep in our own territory. And
Yeah.
we'll be fine if it happens. So it didn't really seem like they dominated Buffalo. They end up winning though. They move on to Baltimore, which I think everybody agreed. We thought Baltimore was going to be much more of a game than what it ended up actually being. They didn't score anything in the second half. The Baltimore Ravens defense is the only thing that showed up aside from Zay Flowers in that game. And they didn't score anymore. They didn't need to, but they didn't score anymore. So, do you think that there's a possibility right now that the Chiefs potentially do that in the Super Bowl as far as they're not going to be as dynamic, they're not going to be as sexy. This is probably going to be a little bit more of a struggle for them than what people are probably used to, and much as Chiefs fans don't want to admit, it's probably going to be a bigger struggle than what they want to admit.
Well, let's talk about that AFC side really quick before I give you the answer. Number one, Miami had to play in Kansas City, and it was 0 degrees with a negative wind chill.
Yes.
Disadvantage Miami. They're not built for that. They never have been. They're a warm weather team coming and playing in an ice block of a game. Of course, they were
Yes.
going to lose that game. Tua's arm cannot throw through the wind. It was just all advantage Kansas City. They're at home. Tyreek's coming home in the playoffs, and now so there's that emotional element to it. So and Miami just couldn't compete. Miami couldn't
Mhm.
compete. Let's talk about Buffalo. Buffalo was an implosion on Buffalo. They hurt
Yes.
themselves. Josh
Mhm.
Allen was doing everything he could. He was trying. He was doing
Mhm.
everything he could to will that team up. And Sean McDermott, for whatever reason, decided to take a risk. Like I wouldn't have even done that in a Madden football game. I don't know what he was thinking. doing that. Like, I remember watching that fake punt, and I was like, what is he doing? What
Yeah.
is he doing? The Bills had the Chiefs. They had
Mhm.
them. They were going to win that game. But because Buffalo was afraid of Patrick Mahomes, they took a risk they did not need to take, which put Patrick Mahomes in positive field territory. And I'm pretty sure they scored a touchdown on that drive.
Yeah, I think so. I think so, if I remember right too.
So let's talk about Lamar. Tony, before this game with Patrick Mahomes, what was Lamar's reputation in the playoffs?
Dude, honestly, and a lot of people may or may not give me crap for this. Lamar Jackson, because he played like his idol, Dak Prescott, known for he couldn't make it past, and we've talked about that. And I even mentioned that to my buddy Michael at work, because I will give Michael credit because he pointed this out to me, and I forgot to give him credit for this. We were in Dallas watching the Buffalo and Kansas City game. We all picked Buffalo to win. However, Michael's like, I think the Chiefs are going to do it. He ended up being right. So shout out to him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just completely had a brain fart, and I don't know why I did that.
Well, we were talking about Lamar Jackson. What was his
Um,
reputation? 1 and
I
4
was
in the
telling
playoffs.
I was telling him when we found out that it was going to be Chiefs versus Ravens, it's like, I want to pick the Ravens, but I could also see the Ravens choking this out. And the reason why I say that is because we look at the last time they were the 1 seed and they faced Tennessee of all teams. They ended up getting destroyed because they were in that bye week. They come out and they end up just laying a goose egg. And
Mm-hmm.
we've even talked about this on a couple different episodes of that 1 seed is nice because you get a bye, you get some guys that are potentially healthy, you get a little bit of extra rest. But how many teams, even in the regular season, have we watched have bye weeks and then they come out really sluggish, they come out really slow the very next week? It's like, man, this isn't
Right.
exactly looking great for teams coming off of a bye, because you get out of that rhythm, you get out of that funk.
Right, but there's 2 coaches and 2 teams that are known to be excellent coming off a bye, that being Andy Reid
You read?
and Kyle Shanahan.
Yes.
But yeah, Lamar Jackson was known for being pretty much a James Harden. During the
Mhm.
regular season, he's lights out. He's going to wow you with all these throws. He's going to win MVP. Come the postseason, when the games actually matter and they count, the reason that we play the games is for the postseason. He's 1 and 4. I'm sorry, 2 and 4 now. I don't even remember
Yeah.
the team that they beat.
Um
2 and 4.
yeah, I'll have to look that up while we're talking about
Oh,
that.
I remember. It was the Texans. And if we really want to compare, CJ Stroud had a better showing in the playoffs than Lamar Jackson did this year.
That's
CJ
true.
Stroud, first year, put a hurting on Cleveland. Albeit it was at home. They were in a dome. I get it. But they still won the game by like 30 points. Lamar
And
Jackson,
and won against the number 1 defense in the NFL for the basically entirety of the season.
yeah. And then you go to Lamar Jackson. Okay, you beat a rookie quarterback. Cool. Cool. Good for you. Now you come
Mhm.
up against a Chiefs team that is nowhere close to this Ravens team statistically. They've had nowhere close of the season that the Ravens have had. And the
Yeah.
Ravens did all that talking at Christmas Day when they beat the 49ers, talking about we're the number 1 team. Lamar Jackson's the real MVP, all that dancing in the locker room. And you come up against the Chiefs and Lamar Jackson can't get it done. The MVP of the league can't allegedly can't get it done. Zay Flowers, you're a rookie. You're in the playoffs. Did nobody coach him on playoff moments? Because he had a good showing, but single-handedly took them out of the game with his fumble, with his taunting. This is not you can't even do that in college. What are
Yeah.
you thinking?
Yeah.
So the Ravens imploded on themselves.
Mhm.
So that's 2 teams that have imploded on themselves out of fear of Patrick Mahomes, and one that really wasn't equipped to handle the elements that they had. I know that people, when it comes to Brock Purdy, in the rain, he's not good. Strangely, they're not saying anything about Tua in the cold. It wasn't even raining. It was just cold. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to say anything about that. So
Well,
yeah, the Chiefs defense is legit. I will give
mhm.
you that. The Chiefs offense really isn't. They have an impact player at quarterback. They don't have a
Mhm.
number 1 receiver, really. I mean, we have to pick one for this team, so we've chosen Rashee Rice. But
Yeah.
other than that, like Travis Kelce hasn't had the year that he's been having. So I think the Chiefs they took advantage of the fear factor of Patrick Mahomes on their side of the playoffs.
Okay. So that's going to kind of dive into a little bit as far as how we think the matchup is going to go, and we'll touch on the 49ers real quick, and again this will kind of segue into it, so you can give me your thoughts on what you think. So on the other side we've got the 49ers, who they've started their playoffs, they've won both of their games. However, they've had a little bit of what I would almost call a stranger path, in the fact of they've started out behind in both
Mm-hmm.
games, not nearly as bad with Green Bay as they did with Detroit, but they started out behind against Green Bay. Green Bay, all honesty, got. I'm not going to say Green Bay hurt themselves, but the fact that they dropped, 3 potential Brock Purdy interceptions is pretty remarkable, because I mean that doesn't happen very often. But the fact that the 49ers kind of had to dig themselves out of the hole, and nothing against your guys' defense, but what was, probably one of the most highly taunted defenses in the NFL has kind of been brought back down to earth a little bit. They, especially if the team starts out hot, the defense is like, whoa, wait a minute. Now, luckily for you guys, you have an offensive coach, an offensive competent system with Brock Purdy and CMC, that if the offense can get it going, kind of get some momentum started, the defense can play up to the level of the offense now, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of, play complementary football and help get them back into the game, which is obviously what they did with Detroit, on top of Detroit making their own mistakes and deciding, yeah, we don't want to kick the points. We want to get touchdowns. We want to go for it on fourth down. We don't want just field goals. We're trying to go to the Super Bowl here. We're going to go big or go home.
Mm-hmm. Well,
You
I
went
got a
home.
couple of questions for you. I got a couple of questions for you on this side of things. I'm sorry, were you done or
Yeah, pretty much. Say if I dive too much anymore, we're gonna start to get into the game itself. But anyway,
Well, let me ask you two questions first before I really dive deep here. The Lions beat the Chiefs week 1. Do you
mhm.
think that the Lions improved, declined, or stayed the same throughout the season? What would you give them as an assessment?
I would say they stayed about the same.
Okay.
I think they stayed about the same to where they were. They stayed pretty good to a two-headed running back attack.
Mm-hmm.
The Jared Goff is, I don't want to really call Jared Goff a game manager, because I mean he did do a little bit more than that. But I'm not going to sit here and say Jared Goff is, the engine that drives the whole machine. Now,
Okay.
defensively, again, this is why I made the comparison to how Detroit is a lot like Dallas, in the fact of that defense is very opportunistic. At some moments, it's going to look like one of the best defenses in the NFL,
Mm-hmm.
until somebody makes a mistake, until there's a blown coverage, until somebody reads the wrong play, and then
Mm-hmm.
they're giving up, easy touchdown routes with no big deal. So I would say they've stayed about the same throughout kind of the course of the year.
Okay, same question on Green Bay. Do you think that throughout the year they improved, declined, or stayed the same?
As much as I hate to admit it, I would say Green Bay improved, because if you look at where they were, if I remember right, they were 3-6. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
pretty much had them dead to rights, out of the water, out of the playoff race. The Jordan Love experiment is a failure, etc. He leads them on, realistically, a 7-2 route into Santa Clara,
Mm-hmm.
and ends up coming pretty close to at least tying it, sending it in overtime, with the exception of a across the body interception that ended the game. For Green Bay, I think it's a mixture of their defense finally stepped up, which has honestly been a big issue for them for a long time. I know it got better
Mm-hmm.
once LaFleur got there. They spent a lot of money on free agents. They got rid of a couple
Right.
guys like Zadarius Smith, who I just don't think ended up working out. Kevin King did not work out as a draft pick. In all honesty, and this is part of me being a Packers hater, but this is also me just trying to be a realist. Jair Alexander, I would not put him as a top 5 corner. I could stand here and make an argument he's probably top 10. I'm not going to sit here and say he's top 5, just because of the attitude that he plays with, and especially once he's been cooked, because we've seen Justin Jefferson just absolutely burn this man worse than Eli Apple. So I mean, he's
Well,
got hardly any
Jefferson's
room to
one
talk.
of the top 5 receivers in the league. So,
Exactly,
okay.
exactly.
But I ask you that because I want to remind you in the audience, both the Packers and the Lions beat the Chiefs this season. That happened
Yes.
this year.
Mhm.
That happened this year.
Mhm.
And then the Packers went and demolished Dallas in Dallas.
Mhm.
That is the team that the Niners had to play against, who had one of the best offensive lines in the league. We're talking about the Packers first,
Yeah.
and a quarterback, excuse me, that everybody says is rising to the occasion, and he's now becoming a superstar in the NFL. That is what people said about Jordan Love in the last however many weeks of the season, 9 weeks of the season. He's becoming a superstar. It was him and CJ Stroud, superstars, one of the best O lines in football, and a pretty decent running back. And the Niners went down. And then the Niners came back and beat them. Then we go to the Lions, also beat the Chiefs in their house, by the way, in their
Yes.
house, week 1.
Yep.
One of the best O lines in football. A really elite set of weapons. They have a great running back. They have another great running back in David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. They've got Reynolds on the outside, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and a defense that's not great. Sam Laporta, great weapons. A Super Bowl quarterback, by the way. Jared Goff has been to a Super Bowl, was a number 1 pick, and they were up 17 on the Niners. And the Niners came back and won the game. As much as we like to say, oh, the Niners look kind of shaky, 2 come from behind wins against some of the better O-lines in football and an assortment of good weapons. Weapons, by the way, that are better than any weapons that the Chiefs have this year, specifically.
Yeah.
I think that's a great quality win for the Niners. Not only does it put to bed this notion that the Niners can't come back if they're down, it erases all the doubt about this young kid, Brock Purdy, and does he have the stones to will his team to a victory when everything is going wrong. Green Bay Packers game. People forget this. It was raining. We know Brock Purdy doesn't do well in the rain. He had to come from behind win in Cleveland. The field goal kicker missed the kick. At Green Bay, he made the kicks, and they came from behind. Down 17 at home. Pressure's on you. Second half. This wasn't a second quarter we managed to make this game winnable. They were down 24-7 at the third quarter and kicked the field goal on the first drive. So it's 24-10, and they come back in the third quarter and win the game. If Patrick Mahomes had done this with the Chiefs, we would be picking Patrick Mahomes to win the Super Bowl going away. But because it's Brock Purdy, it's a toss-up. It's a 2.5-point dog for the Chiefs, and it's disrespectful to the Chiefs, who really haven't done anything and lost this season to the 2 teams the Niners just beat in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, you guys, when you play the better O-lines in football, you get run on. The Chiefs don't have a better O-line than the Packers nor the Lions.
Yeah. Well, here's where I kind of make the argument as far as where I'm at as far as picks for the game, because I'm going to be honest, I'm torn. And I say that because pretty much for a lot of the reasons that you talked about. To me, not saying the 49ers are shaky, because yes, they went down, but they very confidently, they very calmly, okay, we're down, we're going to figure it out, we're going to climb our way back, and we're going to end up at least tying it and potentially giving ourselves a chance to win the game, and they end up finishing. Whereas the Chiefs, they start out more, we're going to get to a point where we can at least be in position to win. Our defense is going to end up bailing us out quite a bit, and then we're going to end up, figuring out how to finish the game. This to me is where I'm more torn as far as who I think is going to win. On one hand, you've got the Kansas City Chiefs, who are going to potentially start a little bit hot. They're also not known for choking a lead, though. Like that's where I would say there's the difference of, I would say, a little bit more worry. Not saying the 49ers can't do it, but if you look at a lot of these great, dynasty teams and whatnot, it's very rare that they make the very simple mistakes that somebody like the Lions are going to make, who are very young, who are very unproven, who they got to, not saying they have to figure themselves out, But let's kind of say it what it is. The Lions were a really good story. And it's one of those, they had all the pressure, all the expectations. If the 49ers lose, it's one of those, okay, they got beat by the Cinderella team. The Detroit Lions are a team of destiny, et cetera, et cetera. But
Oh,
we're not
no,
going
no,
to,
no, no, no. It would have been, they would have buried Brock under the
well,
49ers stadium.
say they would have buried Brock. But I think everybody else could agree, though, as a team, the 49ers would be like, yeah, they're probably going to be one of the top teams in the NFC next year because right now the NFC is completely wide open, with the exception of the 49ers, as far as who wants to really take command. Then you look at the Chiefs, who they're figuring out kind of ways to win. They're not dominant as like they used to be, but they're figuring out ways to keep it and keep that lead going. That's where I'm like hesitant because I look at the 49ers and I know they'll be able to make the comeback, but do you think the 49ers will be able to overcome a Chiefs team who is disciplined, who's been here, you know, this is what their fifth time, like fourth time in a row being in the Super Bowl at this point,
Mm.
like, or 4 out of 5 years they've been in the Super Bowl. It's kind of one of those, I compare it to the NBA with the Warriors. Like if you get the Warriors in that position, they know how to make it work. They know how to get there. Like this is
Flip
probably
side
to me
question for you. Have the Niners choked away a lead this year?
not yet, no. And that's what
So
I'm saying. I'm
just
not
saying.
yeah, I'm not saying that. That's why I said to me it's more 50-50. Like ESPN right now has the 49ers ahead 59.4% chance of winning to Kansas City's 40. To me it's closer. To me it's 50-50. And that's just
Now,
all honesty
why?
because I don't really
Why do
have
you think
a
it's
dog in the
closer?
fight. Like I
Why
said,
do you think it's closer?
I think it's closer mainly for experience with Patrick Mahomes. He's been there, he's done that. And we
Mm.
saw it last year against, as much as I hate to admit it, that was a really good Eagles team last year. One of the best,
It was a really
best
good
passing
Eagles
defense.
defense. Yes.
Yes, really good Eagles defense. Offensively, Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown were clicking. Now, albeit Jalen Hurts can always score, 50 touchdowns when all he's got to do is basically reach the ball over the goal line and somebody's pushing him in the back end, but he's still scoring touchdowns with it. And they were able to come back. They were down, what was it, 10 points or 14 points against the Eagles, and they were able to come
Mm.
back and win it. Now, a lot of people could argue, there's a questionable call at the end, whether or not it was a hold, et cetera, et cetera. Me as an Eagles hater, I say it's not. And at the end of the day, nothing's going to really change the outcome of that game. At the end of the day, the Chiefs ended up winning that Super Bowl. That's
Interesting you
where
use the Eagles as the example because that's another team the 49ers hung 40 on in their house.
exactly. To me, I just base it purely off of experience. And if I look at Kyle Shanahan, and maybe he's learned from this, with the exception of obviously, well, actually, no, with the inclusion of the Chiefs Super Bowl, where if Jimmy Garoppolo maybe makes a better throw, maybe they have a little bit of a better game plan, Kyle potentially has a ring under his belt. Kyle has this really bad thing about he gets cocky. And I think he's learned from that. I really do. I think he's kind of learned, and I think that's kind of the benefit of this 49ers team this season is because we talked about, you look at the Browns game. Yes, they lost to the Browns, but it wasn't on the fact of they played poorly, or if it wasn't on the fact that um, Brock Purdy didn't lead the team down to where they needed to be. He got them where they needed to be. It's just Jake
Mm-hmm.
Moody missed the field goal. That just happened. So this has been kind of, to me, a good learning experiment for the Niners to show, okay, we don't have to just purely dominate, hold on to the lead, and then move on. We can be down and we can make the climb back and we can walk away with the win. But to me,
Well,
that's where I'm hesitant, is just, to me, the Chiefs have more experience in the bigger moments, to me.
well, I'll say one thing, and then I have something else for you here. I have a question for you, actually.
Okay.
This notion that Kyle Shanahan gets cocky, I don't know where that came from, but I think that is sports media just bloviating and being over dramatic. Because if you watch Kyle Shanahan at any point in his career, he has never been cocky.
Here,
Creative, yes. Maybe doing some trick plays when he knows that's the only way to have a chance against certain teams, absolutely. but he has not been a cocky coach. You know who has been cocky? Dan Campbell.
Yes.
That's what it looks like. That's what cockiness looks like. Mike McCarthy. No offense. That's what cockiness looks like, where you think you have something, and the world has shown you that that is not the case. Kyle Shanahan has been cautious. I would argue he's been cautious when he needs to let it loose a little bit. He's been wound up too tight, and maybe gritting his teeth a little bit when things get tight. Now we're seeing a looser Kyle because Kyle finally has a quarterback that can execute his system and won't make the critical mistakes that Jimmy Garoppolo made.
Here's where I would say the two moments, one in particular, I would say is why I say Kyle Shanahan is cocky. But this also probably ties in point to what you're saying about how you watching him as a 49ers fan. It's like, yeah, he's more cautious now. He's more gritting his teeth. And I hate to bring it up because it's, 8, almost 9 years old now. The Super Bowl against the Pats when they're up 28-3. All you had to do is keep running the ball. You had Tevin Coleman. You had, Tevin Coleman and Devontae Freeman. All you had to do is keep running. You keep running that ball. The Pats don't get a chance to come back. And
if they don't stop the run. Like we keep hanging this on Kyle Shanahan. Guys, there's a whole defensive side of the ball.
There is.
28-3. Where is the defense? Kyle Shanahan can't call defense too.
Now here's where I would give a little pushback though, because like we've talked about with the coaching hires, you had Dan Quinn as your head coach. Kyle is essentially running the offense on his own. It is. It's on Dan Quinn because you think about it. That was really
not like Kyle.
Not like Kyle. You're right.
And that makes no sense since Dan Quinn is a defensive coach. You got to get your side of the ball right.
Correct. But how much credit then? Because to me, I look at it as that gives a tremendous amount of respect to Kyle, that even though Dan is the head coach, Dan should be the one that takes the fall for this. There was so much respect for Kyle, what he was able to do with that offense and how he was able to, mastermind it. And then it happens. Now, to your point, he's a defense. Dan's a defensive coach. The defense didn't keep up their side of the ball either. But, to me, also on offense, you can play. It's going to sound really stupid. You can play offense defensively. And what I mean by that is what was always the biggest formula to beat Peyton Manning? What was always the biggest formula to beat Tom Brady? What's been the biggest formula to beat Patrick Mahomes? Keep them off the field. Now, again, I'm not saying you have to run the ball every single play and just run, because that's not going to work. You're going to have to pass because eventually the team is just going to, stuff the box. They're not going to be able to run, and then you're going to have to throw. So, I mean, exactly. I'm not saying it's all Kyle's fault for that, but to me, it's like, that's where I give Kyle a little bit more of the grief for that.
See, you give a team 28 points and a 25-point lead at halftime.
That should
win the game if the defense shows up at all. If the defense shows up at all, you win the game. Kyle Shanahan didn't call a fumble from Matt Ryan. He didn't call a fumble at midfield. That's not. We keep hanging this on Shanahan. I watched that Super Bowl. That was not an offensive coordinator blunder. That was a defensive coordinator and defensive coach blunder. 28-3 at halftime, and they're hanging it on Kyle. And we keep using words like cocky and arrogant and too cute and all of these things assigned to Kyle. That Super Bowl is on Kyle's head. And he scored 20. Didn't he score 31 points? 28. They might have scored one more time. I don't remember. But it's hung on Kyle. He did not call the defense that game.
If I remember
that is the head coach and the defensive coordinator's job. Now the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, the first one, that one could be on Kyle. Fine, sure. Hang that one on him.
That was going to be the other one. Now that one. Funny enough, that one I give a little bit more of leeway to Kyle because to me, if Jimmy makes a better throw, especially in that second half, kind of towards the end, if Jimmy makes a better throw, we're talking about a different story because that to me isn't as much on Kyle as to me the first one against the Patriots was. Now,
As a 28-3 lead at halftime, and the defense completely lays down to the greatest quarterback we've ever seen, and we're hanging that on the offensive coordinator. That is wild to me. That is wild to me.
I mean, I get it, and like I said, I'm not denying it. It definitely goes to Dan Quinn and the defensive coordinator, because again, I always used to hear the old adage: if you can score at least 21 points or more, you should win the game.
Exactly, and he did that in the first half. He did that. He over-delivered on what he needed to do. Actually, correct. I think it was a pick six that gave him the 28. So he scored 21.
Yeah. It was a pick six. It was a pick six. That was like right before half. Yeah, I think it was like right at halftime, and we're like, oh man, it's game over. This is done.
Right.
And actually, they didn't score a single point again after that.
Right. So he did his job. We need to stop hanging that on Kyle Shanahan like there wasn't a head coach who was supposed to be a defensive guru on the same team.
Yeah.
We got to stop hanging that on the offensive coordinator. You know what? You know what we can hang on, Dan Quinn? Let's see. Do we have any other playoff blunders from Dan Quinn where he is the defensive guy?
Just a few.
How about a couple of weeks ago in the Super Bowl to a team that is A, younger, B, has a quarterback who's inexperienced, and C, you're at home.
Well, as much as I appreciate you giving the Cowboys a Super Bowl victory 2 weeks ago, or at least a Super Bowl appearance.
I'm just saying, do we talk about that with Dan Quinn? No, he suddenly has another job. Just saying. I don't get it. I don't get it. Why do we hang that on Shanahan?
I'm with you. I'm just as confused as to how Dan was able to get a coaching job for that one too. Now I will say, Greg brought up in the comments, Kyle Shanahan blew the last Super Bowl. He was up 28-10 late in the fourth quarter and still lost to Greg's Chiefs, since Craig is a big Chiefs fan.
Okay. So I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Besides quarterback, give me one position on the field where the Chiefs have a decided advantage over the 49ers.
Honestly, I would agree. Greg brought this up as far as the cornerbacks in LJ Sneed and Trent McDuffie.
LJ Sneed and Trent McDuffie. Okay. Other than that, the Niners have the advantage. Running back, wide receiver, offensive line, defensive line, linebackers, and safety.
The only other position that I would maybe argue the Chiefs have it better, and it's purely just because of one player, is defensive line, and that's with Chris Jones.
You think that the Chiefs' defensive line with Chris Jones is better than the Nick Bosa, Chase Young, Eric Armstead, Javon Hargrave led 49ers defensive line?
Yep.
So you think Chris Jones is better than four other people? One of them being a Bosa, who won Defensive Player of the Year last year.
I say three of them. I don't really include Chase because, we talked and joked about this with Chase Young potentially sitting out this coming Super Bowl. I doubt that happens, like you and I talked about. I kind of doubt him because the potential is there, but unfortunately he hasn't really lived up to that potential in the NFL so far. So I take Chase Young out of that, but Chris Jones over the other three, yes, I would
over Nick Bosa, who won Defensive Player of the Year.
Mm-hmm.
And was in the running to do it again.
Yep.
Okay.
And I say that because we saw what the Chiefs look like without him. And no offense to any of those guys on your team because of the depth and the rotation that you guys got. But if one of those guys isn't on the field, your defense doesn't take two steps back if they're not there, if that makes sense. And that's not an insult to them. That's just how deep your guys' defensive line is. To me, Chris Jones is a bigger impact player
than Nick Bosa.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I guess we're going to have to argue that on another day. I don't think so. I think the 49ers defensive line, especially when it comes to stopping the run, is pretty much stifling. They're weak on the ends to jet sweeps and things like that. But if you want to just line up and run at the 49ers and you don't have a speedy back like Jahmyr Gibbs, you are in for a long afternoon.
Yeah.
The Chiefs' run defense is abysmal. They struggle with the zone run the zone run scheme.
Mm-hmm.
And guess who has the best left tackle in football? The 49ers. Guess who has one of the better defensive player of the year, another impact player, Eric Armstead, and a number 1 pick or number 2 pick on the defensive line. That as soon as he got inserted into that defensive line, the 49ers went on a 6-game winning streak.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Niners. Yes, we saw the Chiefs without Chase Young. Without
Chris
what's
Jones.
his name? Chris Jones. Guess
Yep.
what? They lost to the Lions by 1 point.
Yep.
1 point.
Yep.
They almost won that game with a pick six from Pat. 1 point.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The 49ers have a decided advantage everywhere except for quarterback and cornerback. I'll give you that. And even on quarterback, that's only based on Pat's history, because this year he didn't do as well statistically as Brock. He doesn't have as many touchdowns. He has more interceptions. He hasn't won as many games, less passing yards than Brock Purdy has. I don't know.
Yeah.
I know it's Patty. It's Patty. Fine. You know, you want to give the nod to Patty because you've seen him in various Super Bowls doing it back to back. Fine. How about we give up this evidence? Leads a team, comes in, rookie year, half down, third position on the depth chart, goes in, leads the 49ers on a 9-game winning streak to the NFC Championship, gets hurt, tears his UCL, recovers from the UCL, comes back, not only leads back to the NFC Championship game, then comes back in 2 playoff games back-to-back late in the fourth quarter, and now goes to the Super Bowl. Never seen Patty do that.
That's true.
Just saying.
That's very true. Now, again, this is just playing more devil's advocate. This isn't me hating on Brock. This is more me playing devil's advocate, because maybe people have brought this up, maybe they haven't. This is the same 49ers team that were able to get to really similar positions with Jimmy. And in one playoff game, Jimmy didn't even throw like that many passes in the second half.
I remember that. That's why I think the Niners are going to win this game, because we actually have a quarterback this time that Kyle Shanahan trusts, that has shown he can lift the team up and put them on his shoulders and will them to a victory when everything is going wrong. Jimmy Garoppolo was not that. Jimmy Garoppolo was a lot of the reasons why the 49ers were losing games, because he was throwing picks.
Yeah. Jimmy, you want to know what I think it is, and this might be a little bit of a reach because this is kind of a spur of the moment, just popped into my head. Jimmy kind of reminds me, and I wonder if it's a lot of, he maybe got cocky because of the fact he sat behind Tom Brady. He was touted. He was supposed to be groomed to take over for Tom after Tom potentially retired. Obviously, Tom was like, no, I still have years left to play. Get him out of here. Bill wanted to keep him. Robert Kraft said, all right, Jimmy, you're gone. We're going to trade him to San Francisco. And honestly, and we can't deny, Jimmy did well. However, much to your point, being a 49ers fan, watching a lot of the games, and most of us watching him, he choked a lot of times, unfortunately, by just making dumb plays. And it's like, Jimmy, you're killing people. You're killing people.
Yeah,
so
Brock Purdy really does not have that reputation for making dumb plays. There are some plays that get tipped up in the air and they get intercepted or things like that. But other than that, this kid he's done everything that the media, sports media, has asked him to do. He's checked every single box except for one: beat an elite quarterback when it matters most. He's about to do that on Sunday.
Okay. So that leads to probably the last part of this topic before we move on to our next one. Like you said, the Chiefs are 2.5-point underdogs to San Francisco right now, and the over-under is 47.5. Do you agree with that?
I would not have been surprised if the Chiefs were favored, but when I thought about what makes the Niners great, and I thought about what the Chiefs have been great at this year, I understand why. The Niners have, in my opinion, the MVP of the league, and I wouldn't be surprised if he won this on Sunday, Christian McCaffrey, who has been the driving force in a lot of those comebacks, along with Brock Purdy. So they don't have, if they cannot stop Christian McCaffrey, which they have an issue with zone run concepts, and that is what the 49ers do best. Their wide receivers block all the way down the field. Trent Williams coming out off the line, you do not want to be in his way, because he's coming with a vengeance. George Kittle planted Aiden Hutchinson on his ass. And I don't think the Chiefs have an Aiden Hutchinson type of player on their team.
I say, yeah, because, I mean, don't get me wrong, and Greg has talked about George Karlaftis. I watched George at Purdue, and if I remember right, this might be his rookie year, maybe it's his second year. George isn't bad. I don't see George as that big of a pass rushing presence. So especially not compared to Aiden. Aiden has been a complete and total culture change, and changing for
Right.
the Lions as a whole. So
Right.
you're gonna
So I saw it and I was like, I wonder why. And not only did it, the Niners opened up as 1-point favorites, and then it ballooned up to 2.
yeah
So I was really surprised as to how, and then I found out why. Their center
yeah
is not going to play. Tooney's out. And I think
yeah
one of their other O linemen are injured. And that's the side that Nick Bosa is going to be on primarily. And if you think the 49ers are not thinking about the loss that they took to these guys 4 years ago, you are out of your mind. Fred Warner has already talked about the scars. He feels those scars from that loss. They're coming in there on fire. These
yeah
49ers are coming in there on fire. They got the best running back in the league. Statistically, they have the best quarterback in the league. I will say statistically,
mm-hmm.
just to ease people freaking out. They have better receivers than the Chiefs. They have a better defensive line and linebacking crew than the Chiefs do. Maybe the secondary is a little spotty at cornerback. I'll give you that. But Charvarius Ward is a hell of a corner, and the Chiefs
Mm-hmm.
don't have great receivers. Their
yeah
best one is Travis Kelce.
yeah pretty much.
So I understand why the Niners are favored, and I actually think the Niners are going to win this one.
So looking at the injury report, so the 49ers have 2 people. They have Eric Armstead and George Kittle are both listed as questionable. Their estimated return date is February 11th. The Chiefs do have 3 players. They have Sky Moore at wide receiver is listed as questionable. Joe Tooney, their guard, is listed as questionable. And Jared McKinnon was actually on the injured reserve, but are all estimated to return on February 11th as well.
All right.
So maybe a little bit better than we thought. Like I said, I'm still more 50-50 on it more than anything. I think it could go either team's way. I won't be surprised. Whoever wins, I'm not honestly going to be surprised. Doesn't matter who wins, doesn't matter by, well, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter by how much, because if it's a blowout, I'm be like, no, I was really surprised if this happens. But if it's
I
a
have a
close
question for
game,
you.
whoever wins.
Do you think how do you think the Niners can win this game?
Like I said, I think the Niners win purely by a lot like to what you said. Use Christian McCaffrey to run the ball, keep Patrick Mahomes off the field, and I'm gonna say this too, like we talked about with against Jordan Love and against Jared Goff. This is kind of be where I almost again, I'm not going to slam the 49ers defense because I'm not going to sit here and say the 49ers defense is terrible, but they didn't play up to what I would probably expect of them against who's supposed to be a rising star quarterback in Jordan Love. I'd expect them to play maybe a little bit better. Not saying he can't have a good game, not saying he can't have momentum on his side. I expect him to play a little bit better. And I'll give him a little bit more of a break with Jared Goff because, like you said, he is a Super Bowl quarterback. He was with the Rams. He's faced the 49ers a ton throughout his career. So he's used to facing them quite a bit and led the Rams to a Super Bowl and just wasn't able to get over the hump.
By the way, look at the stats on Jordan Love that night. He did not play well at all. Most of his yards came from chuck and duck, pass interference.
Yeah.
He didn't even throw for 200 yards that game.
Hey, believe I made that argument, but I got a lot of hate for it. I got a lot of hate. Jordan Love hater. I got so much hate for that.
Yeah.
But to me, I think that's where if the 49ers want to win, their defense has to play as big a complementary football to their offense as possible. Get Patrick Mahomes off the field. If you can't get him off the field, at least frustrating because you know they're going to probably have some issues running the ball. Not Isaiah Pacheco doesn't. To me, Isaiah Pacheco is not a bad guy. He's kind of almost that in between of a bell cow running back and a speedster. Like I don't expect him to go break off for 70 yards with speed ease, but I also don't expect him to be able to just barrel through a defensive line with no problem at all.
Right.
And then, like we talked about with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, even though I'm representing LSU at the moment, hasn't, to me, lived up to the potential that I thought he was going to, because to me, he could be more of a speedster if they would use him in that factor. And funny enough, I think it was against the Ravens, I watched him just break off a huge play, and I'm like, oh, well, what I talked about with Jonathan about him not living up to potential, that's going to make me eat my words, unfortunately.
Well, I think you're mostly right. keep Patrick Mahomes off the field is but that's the best way to beat him, but he's going to have to take the field at some point. If the
Oh yeah,
defense
100%.
can beat this offense, which I think they can do, this defense, this game is what this defense was built for.
Mm-hmm.
This game is what this defense was built for. All the chips on the line, and the 49ers have shown this against all their big opponents this year, except for one, which was the Ravens and Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson always gives the Niners problems. Lamar Jackson-like quarterback always gives the Niners problems. But the Niners played against another MVP candidate in Dak Prescott and completely beat him. The Niners played against an elite MVP candidate in Jalen Hurts in his house and hung 40 on him. The Niners went to Jacksonville to play another somehow touted guy in Trevor Lawrence and hung 35 in their house. Like when
Come on, man.
He
was the prince that was promised, as Nick Wright would put it.
As
Nick Wright would put it, the prince that was promised.
And him and Justin Herbert, I don't understand the hype, but that's for another day. But the Niners have shown up in the big games, the ones that the lights get the brightest. The Niners have shown up in all but one of those games with an elite defense, and they have shown out. This game is what this defense was built for. It wasn't built for the Packers. It wasn't built for the Lions. It was built for the Super Bowl. When John Lynch put this team together, this is what he was looking at. I think you're going to see a different Niners defense, especially if Brock and Christian McCaffrey get going, because Debo was there. Ayuk was there. Christian wasn't there, but Kittle was there. Bosa was there. Fred Warner was there. We talk about experience. Trevarius Ward was there, just on the other team, but he was there in that Super Bowl. They remember the pain of that loss. And this Chiefs team does not have a Tyreek Hill. So
now I do have to ask, and this isn't me trying to convince you to, not root for your Niners. This isn't me trying to convince you to, pick the Chiefs or whatever. But if there's anybody that knows how a team could potentially screw up a win, what do you think is going to hurt the 49ers in this game? Or what do you think would potentially cost them winning this game? Or do you think it's anything the 49ers won't do? Do you think it's more potentially the refs, or maybe Patrick Mahomes plays better than what a lot of people probably expect?
No, because Patrick Mahomes in Super Bowls has been pretty bad, actually. He has not played well in Super Bowls. What I think will be the Niners' Achilles heel is if they allow the jet sweep to get the best of them. If they allow Jerick McKinnon and maybe McCole Hardman to get out on the edge and get the best of them, now Patrick Mahomes, the pressure is off because he can throw a couple of incomplete passes and get a jet sweep and get 7-8 yards. You put Mahomes in third and short, he's going to beat you every time. That, I think, would be the Niners' Achilles heel. Other than that, maybe pass interference or non-holding calls would be the only thing.
But for whatever reason,
the most penalized offensive lineman in the league. So
and that for whatever reason, the referees were like, "Oh, we're supposed to call holding on the Chiefs against the Ravens." Nope.
Well, the refs have been pretty consistent with swallowing their whistle in the playoffs, specifically this year, which typically happens because they want the players to decide the game. But the egregious ones you got to call. Yeah.
So let's move on to our next topic, the two that are kind of more fun / open for debate. Obviously, as we've talked about earlier, Dan Quinn is now in as the Washington Commanders head coach. As we talked about last week, we're like, the job is open. They're interviewing Dan Quinn. They're going to potentially hire this guy. They end up not hiring Eric Bieniemy. Eric Bieniemy is actually out of Washington now, and is technically, he can go anywhere he wants to. Maybe he goes back to Kansas City with Matt Nagy. Here's the other thing I want to throw out there real quick, and I know Mike Hughes, my Chicago buddy, will appreciate this. You know how many people, well, I'm not going to say a lot of people, but I've started to see little articles here and there, like inklings of, man, look what a great job Matt Nagy has done with Patrick Mahomes. And I'm just kind of sitting there and I'm looking at all like the Bears posts, and I'm thinking about all the Bears fans. Like, No. You don't get to say,
Right.
"Oh, look at what a great job Matt Nagy has done." No, Matt Nagy has done no good job. He did
Okay.
everything good prior to the Bears because we didn't know any better because we didn't know what a type of a head coach he was going to be. He comes to Chicago, can't do any. He, for whatever reason, is able to get Mitchell Trubisky into the playoffs twice with the Bears, but overall is not a good head coach. Did not do well with Justin Fields, and then ends up having to go back to Kansas City and ride Andy Reid's and Patrick Mahomes' coattails into yet another Super Bowl. But I just thought that was funny
and
that
Patrick Mahomes plays the worst year of his career under Matt Nagy.
under Matt Nagy. But yeah, it's Dan Quinn's show in Washington. And then surprisingly enough, he is able to convince Kliff Kingsbury not to go to the Raiders and to come to Washington instead. They're going to pretty much have their pick of the litter as far as quarterbacks go, because who knows if Chicago's going to actually take Caleb Williams or not. Caleb Williams may even still be on the board if they're sitting at number 2 still.
Mm-hmm.
And they hired the general manager from the Golden State Warriors to run football operations.
Washington is such a clown show organization. It's such a clown show. What are they doing? What are they doing? This is ridiculous. Number one, Kliff Kingsbury hasn't won anything ever.
No.
He's
Nope.
never won anything.
He didn't do great at Texas Tech. He didn't do great in Arizona.
No, they made it to the playoffs and got boat raced by the Rams. Like that's it. They've never made it to, they've never won the West. Kliff Kingsbury, he had Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes looked awful under Kliff Kingsbury. He got better in the NFL. Like, I don't understand.
And you know what's funny too, for anybody who doesn't know or doesn't watch college football as much, you know who Kliff Kingsbury was with this past football season, all season long?
Caleb?
With Caleb Williams and USC. And look what happened. USC has one of their worst years with a Heisman winning quarterback who, honestly, statistically, like I said, Caleb still did what Caleb has done all his career. Like, he didn't statistically have a bad year, but they did not come up with the wins that they were supposed to come up with.
Washington is a clown show organization. First of all, you're in an organization where the powerhouses are the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles. Yep. And you hire a defensive guy who got boat raced in the playoffs by a team that barely had any offensive receivers. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Then you follow that up with hiring the one guy that Arizona didn't even want. And they would have rather, they wanted to take a risk on somebody who had never had a head coaching job before, ever, over Kliff Kingsbury.
Mm-hmm.
That's the guy that you hire?
Yep.
What are you doing? What are you doing? You were going the opposite of what is winning in the league. You were doing the opposite. Let's hire somebody who has a track record for not winning and somebody who has choked away 2 playoff victories, one being a Super Bowl, and Dan Quinn. I don't understand. I don't.
And here's what's being even more sad as somebody who has watched Washington for a long time in the division. They have a ton of cap space this coming off season. They still have Terry McLaurin. They have Jahan Dotson. They still have Deron Payne. They still have Jonathan Allen. Like, there are pieces there that I'm not going to say Washington's going to be a Super Bowl contender. But, I mean, if you were able to get a couple good free agency signings, you're sitting at the number 2 overall pick. So you're going to start off pretty much every single round, almost the first pick every time. You can build a pretty decent young team for the future if you hire the right guy to come in there to route the ship. But just the fact that
they need a quarterback.
They do need a quarterback.
That's it. They have every other piece in an offensive line. They have every other piece that you need. They just need a quarterback. Like a Jaden Daniels would be great there. Michael Penix would be great there. Maybe Bo Nix would be another one that I think would really fit into what Washington wants to do, because these guys are passers. And in Jaden Daniels' case, if the pass isn't there, he can make something happen with his legs, hypothetically. But that's really all Washington needs, except for the coaching staff. They need the right coaching staff. And Kliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn these are the, and you're in a division with Sirianni and Mike McCarthy, and now Kellen Moore has just joined the division again. And like,
And Vic Fangio as the defensive coordinator for Philly.
I mean, what are you doing? What you need offense. You need an offensive mindset in Washington. Aren't they tired of defensive guys in Washington?
Apparently
Haven't they had
not.
enough?
Yeah, they had Ron Rivera and they got rid of him.
I mean, geez. And this is how many years in a row now? How many years? Come on, man. This is such a clown show.
Yeah,
I put them up there with the Panthers. It's just, they don't even know what they're doing anymore.
Hey, at least the Panthers with Cam Newton got it right in 2011. They at least made it to a Super Bowl, lost it to a great Broncos team. They at least made it to a Super Bowl. They've made it to the NFC Championship. Washington has barely been able, they've been right there along with Dallas. They've barely been able to get out of the wild card spot, much less even remotely sniff the championship game. I noticed though, and this will kind of lead us into our last topic, there was one quarterback you didn't mention would potentially be a great fit in Washington, and that is J.J. McCarthy. And according to Doug Rush, Doug Rush is a guy that I know who writes articles for the Giants. I can't remember what the big newspaper that he wrote was, but he is actually verified. He put on his Facebook that according to Albert Breer, I wouldn't rule out the Giants falling for someone like J.J. McCarthy. And Doug posted the question, let's say McCarthy is available in the second round at pick number 39. Is he worth taking for the Giants?
Well, I can see the Giants falling in love with him because they don't really have a great track record of quarterback choices in their entire organizational history. The one that they really, of recent note, is Eli Manning. Hall of Fame coach or Hall of Fame quarterback, sure. Beat Tom Brady twice. Other than that, a lot of nothing. So, yeah, of course, I can see the Giants falling for a J.J. McCarthy. I don't think he's very good. I think that the Harbaugh system is what made J.J. McCarthy shine. He was not the driving force of that Michigan team. It was their defense and their running game, just like every Harbaugh coach team. That's always been his calling card. Defense, run game, open up the pass. J.J. McCarthy's not great. You look at these other quarterbacks, I mean, besides maybe Caleb, you and I both have our doubts about Caleb. Drake May, we're not really high on. Jaden Daniels won the Heisman. Michael Penix made the Natty. Bo Nix had Oregon within a win of going to the Natty. The rest of these guys, I mean, maybe Jordan Travis would probably be the only other one that you could say would show some interest before his injury. I mean, that's really it. J.J. McCarthy didn't really do much. Drake May, they lost to teams that they should not have lost to, albeit it was a rivalry. And then you got Caleb Williams, who's never won anything. So I can see the Giants falling for McCarthy, of course, because they don't have a track record for developing and choosing good quarterbacks.
Yeah. Well, and it was funny. So I commented that, into which I did get some Giants fans. A lot of them actually agreed with me because I said I wouldn't take him at pick number 39. I would maybe take him at third or fourth. All honesty, if it was me, I would probably lean more towards the fourth round of him. And the way I explained it was, if you look at your first, second, even potentially your third round guys, depending on what skill position it is, those are probably going to be your day one starters. If not, they're going to be in the rotation with your starters. Again, depending on what the position is. Right. And yeah, it's except for quarterback, unless you're down to your third string and then you just have no option. Sometimes that works out though. But yeah, that was the exact thing that I commented on there. It's like JJ had the benefit of, you had the top, if not one of the top offensive lines in college football for 3 years in a row. 2 for sure, because they won the award for the best offensive line in college football 2 years in a row. I can't remember if they won it this year or not. If they did, that would be 3. At minimum, they're one of the top 5 offensive lines this year, regardless. You had Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards as your 1-2 power back punch in the backfield, being able to run the ball all over. Blake Corum setting the new season rushing record for running backs at Michigan this year. because of a dominant offensive line and a smothering, very good defense that, one of J.J. McCarthy's years that he was at Michigan was headlined by Aiden Hutchinson. So, yeah, to me, when I look at the Giants, they're trying to build an offensive line. They've done it the last 2 drafts with let's see, was it Evan? Yeah, Evan Thomas, I think his name.
I don't know. I don't think they're trying very hard.
They got 2 guys, I believe they're both ironically out of Alabama. They've got 2 guys that are first round picks that are solid offensive line, but the other 3 positions are just so bad as far as center, as far as the guard position, and I believe the other tackle on the other end are so bad that they just don't have an offensive line. You've had Saquon Barkley, so you have a good running back. He just doesn't have any protection. And unfortunately, he's a lot like what CMC was with the Panthers of I have to literally do everything because I don't have a wide receiver that I can rely on that can go catch the ball or a tight end, and I have to run and catch and do everything. And unfortunately, he gets hurt as a result of it because he's having to do too much.
Right. And so to answer your question, yes, I can see them falling in love with a J.J. McCarthy. I just don't think they should. They should go for another quarterback who has shown that they can actually throw the ball and that they have the eye, they have the feet discipline, they have the pocket discipline, all of that jazz. They can actually show that versus, he just won the Natty and his defense was great. I
could see them falling for him. I don't think they take him that early if he's on the board, because other people brought that up, and I agree. There are so many quarterback hungry and quarterback needy teams. Somebody will probably reach for him and pick him much earlier than what he needs to be at.
Yep.
I think if they have the option, and especially with Brian Daboll leading the charge, I don't think they go after him at any point unless they pull a Mike Shanahan at, with RG3 and Kirk Cousins. Like, yeah, I didn't really want RG3. I wanted this kid, but I didn't take Kirk Cousins until the 4th round for a reason. Because, I think Brian Daboll's a lot smarter. I would hopefully think they learned from the Daniel Jones experiment. Stop taking guys that you think are just big and can throw a football.
Yeah. Stop taking guys that look like Eli Manning. How about that? Let's just go the complete opposite direction.
He legit looks like the actor that if it was a movie starring Eli Manning beating the Patriots, Daniel Jones would be Eli Manning. Like if there was a wish.com for people that you could order and you wanted Wish or Temu version of Eli Manning, you would get Daniel Jones.
That's a good comparison. That is 100% correct.
Like it's so bad, man. It's so bad. But Jonathan, I appreciate you coming on, man. It's fun as always. We will see what happens with the Super Bowl with your 49ers and the Chiefs as far as who takes home the win. If the 49ers can get their 6th Super Bowl in franchise history, be tied for first place, or if Patrick Mahomes gets his 3rd ring and continues to solidify himself as at least the current GOAT of the NFL world since Tom Brady retired. But yeah, man, let people know where they can find you as far as sports and music goes, whatnot, if they want to try to get you to catch the smoke, if they need to.
Miller Time JK on X, formerly known as Twitter. I am Jonathan K, spelled Jonathan Jonathan on every other platform.
Okay. And then, of course, you can always find Jonathan here on Inside the Hoosier Mind. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all at Inside the Hoosier Mind. And you can also find me anywhere where you get your podcasts at: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, Pandora, iHeartRadio, etc. Again, Jonathan, appreciate you being on, man. Hopefully everybody enjoyed it. Hope everybody enjoys the Super Bowl. We'll probably take a little bit of a hiatus after this. We'll probably pick back up when free agency starts because we know there's a few big names that are going to be free agents. One of them being Russell Wilson is going to be a free agent. And obviously after the Super Bowl ends and whatnot, we'll probably have a better idea of where's the potential rumors where he's going to be when free agency heats up and whatnot. But hope everybody enjoys the Super Bowl, and we will see y'all next time. Everybody have a great weekend, great night, and we will see y'all later.
Go Niners.
Bye.